I'm Matthew Lamb, and I am absolutely amazed, gobsmacked to be stood here as the chair of the Social Audit Network, full stop, and to be welcoming you all to what will be a fab day. It really will be a fantastic day. The Social Audit Network annual gathering has been to many cities. It's been to Salford, it's been to Newcastle, it's been to Birmingham, from my memory, and probably lots of other places too. But we are delighted to be back in Liverpool this year and back at the Women's Organisation, which is just a fantastic venue and a great host organisation for the Social Audit Network.
But we can use that as a strategic tool where we can drive the direction of our business. You look at any regular, commercial business operation who talks to their customers, they change their services, they develop new products in light of that. We should be doing the same. When we're social accounting, we're listening for the voices to tell us what do we really need to be doing in the world. So, in terms of the social accounting process, step one is literally, okay, what are we here to do? Do we know, can we articulate well enough what our vision, our mission, our values, what we do every day in service of those? If we can get that written down, then we're starting from a good place. Then what we want to do is to say, okay, what would we expect to achieve as a consequence of that? So you're thinking through, that kind of theory of change model where you start with, well, this is what we're trying to do. What would we see different at the end in that case? If we know what impact looks like, we're much more likely to achieve it. Then what we try to do is to say, okay, let's try and map out then those objectives that give us a sense of what this journey looks like, what we would expect to see differently along the way, and what might be the little indicators along the way that would tell us we've made a difference. What might people say if we've made that difference? So you map that out. Then what you do is to say, and who are the people who will know the answers to these questions? And sometimes it will be your customers, sometimes it might be directors, sometimes it might be investors, it might be partner organisations. But those are your stakeholders, and what we do as part of the social accounting process is to map those out. Typically, we might look like something that looks like onion rings, where you're at the centre of that and you think, okay, how much do these organisations influence me? So what you could end up with is something that looks a bit like this, where you can say, okay, this is quite complex. Have I thought through every single one of my stakeholders? What we try to do is to say sometimes people will have a much bigger effect on your organisation because they're at the heart of it, they are your customers. Other times you might be saying, yeah, okay, well they're kind of a partner, we talk to them occasionally, we deliver some stuff. They might be further out in your ring of stakeholders, but all of them have a voice that needs to be heard. And all I'm trying to encourage you to do is think, when I hear something, do I know what I'm listening to and can I trust it? And we'll come back this afternoon to, should you trust everything you hear? Okay? All right, I'm going to hand over to Anne. Have a lovely day, and it's lovely to see you all. So.
That's to them is more important. But because they're focusing on that, they become an incredibly successful organisation. So yes, it runs alongside the financial accounts, reports on social, environmental and economic performance and impact. It's controlled by the organisation. This is about empowering you and your stakeholders, your staff, your management committee, to really get involved and control this and take ownership of it. But it's trying to be accountable to all your stakeholders. So sometimes, if you're measuring sort of social impact, something like that, you're just thinking about the people you work with. What this also says is, what about your staff? What about your volunteers? What do your management committee think? What do people, I work also in local government, so what do the commissioners think of the services that you provide? So you're asking a sort of 360 review as part of this. But it needs to be a mixture of measurement and story, so the quantitative and the qualitative. You need both in there to get the true picture of what's happening. And we believe that independent verification is crucial to be able to prove the value of what you do. Prove whether it's robust or not. Prove that what you're telling is true and good news and not fake news. Okay, thank you very much.
Hello there, my name's Neil McInroy, Chief Executive of the Centre for Local Economic Strategies. Firstly, I'm really sorry I can't be with you today. I had a horrible clash and I've got to be in Glasgow today with the Scottish Government event on inclusive growth. But my colleague Stuart McDonald's here and hopefully he can pick up some of the points I make and have a discussion from there on in. I've got 5 points to make and I hope they're useful for you. Firstly, I'd like to say and think, and you need to maybe realise this, that you are a movement. You're a movement to infect social value in society and in the economy. And it is early days in that. And in that, I think you're at the beginning more than the end. Clearly the Social Value Act, you've made inroads because of the Social Value Act, and a wider consciousness is emerging about the importance of social value. But because you're just at the beginning, you need to keep plugging away, and Claes is fully supportive of your endeavours, and we just need to keep plugging away. It's the beginning, and we're only going to the end of this infecting social value and how society and economy functions. Often, the questions of social value are too often trumped by efficiency and the cuts agenda. And that's a challenge for you, I feel, in terms of the frame we're in. And there's something, and it links to my third point. It's about social justice. What is social value and social order? I think it stands at the core of a social justice movement. In essence, it says society needs to be more social.
I've been given the task just to announce the launch of the Social Audit Network Learning Platform and put it in context a little bit about what's gone before. So I was going to be doing this with Lisa McMullen, but unfortunately she's unwell today and is unable to be here. So I'm standing in, and so I'm both Alan Kay and Lisa McMullen. So just to give a little bit of a historical background and why, in particular, we have created this learning platform. And it goes back quite a number of years, and social accounting and audit goes back decades, really, as Matthew was explaining right at the beginning of today. And one of the first, in recent times, handbook that was produced was it was called a workbook, and it was produced by the New Economics Foundation in about 1995, 1996. And one of the co-authors was John Pearce, who was one of our influential founders and the founder of SAN. So this was the first book that was available for small organisations. So it was social auditing, which it was called in those days, for small organisations. That was then replaced by this manual and workbook. And it also came with a CD, but the copy I've got is missing the CD. But it had a lot of information on it. And it was published under the auspices of a programme that was actually in Liverpool. And Liverpool City Council backed social accounting and audit in the late 1990s, early 2000s. And I had the privilege to work on that with a number of other people, including John Pearce. And we decided that it was good to have a manual and to update the previous one and create one that could be used as a resource for all sorts of different organisations. So that happened around the turn of the century. Then SAN was formed around that time, and we became part of a European-funded project that was looking at impact of social enterprises and community enterprises. And on the back of that project is that we did a lot of research to create the manual, and it also came with a CD, and this was published in about 2005. And it had a lot of information, it sold well, and it was widely used. Then a lot of the information it contained in that manual began to come out of date, and so we managed through crowdfunding and going to a number of large social enterprises who funded the project. We did research in order to create Prove and Proven accounts, and this was published in 2011, and this is the latest physical manual or book, and it's been referred to already this morning. Also with a CD, and it's got lots of information in it. Now, we were in the process of thinking, should we update this? And although about 90% of it is still valid, is that we decided that rather than create a physical document, is that we would create a learning platform. And it was partly in response to the way that people learn has changed dramatically in recent years. Many more people have access to the internet, they're able to do their own research. And I have 3 children, all who are in their 20s, and all of them go and research things on the internet. They go and find out information, and then they try and adapt that information to the current situation. They don't go to physical documents or physical books or libraries as often as we used to do. And so the way of learning is around self-learning. It's collecting information, it's building on what other people are doing, and then it's adapting it to your own situation. So we thought, let's create some kind of learning platform through the internet. And those that are members of the Social Audit Network, you will have received, or hopefully you will have received, an email today. It's called something like Infrastructure. There's an invitation for you to join the learning platform, or at least have access to it. So what's on this learning platform? We're using software called Canvas, which is used very often in academic and college situations. But what we've put on it is a welcome and how to use the learning platform. There's a bit about definitions, understanding social accounting and audit. There is the whole of the guide on it, and everything that's in the CD is available on it, including workbooks that people have developed separately to run parallel with the guide. And also a number of people who have been involved in simplifying the stages of social accounting and audit, and there's a 4-page document there called the 10 Simple Stages Social Accounting and Audit. There's a page around international networks and how you can contact other sister organisations of SAN. Case studies, there are 1 or 2 pages each, these case studies. They were done a number of years ago, but they not only describe how organisations have applied social accounting, but they also talk about the benefits of doing social accounting and audit. There are also some examples, some recent examples of social reports. There are some of the more recent ones. There are also, I don't know if you're aware, but this area of social accounting is also an academic discipline. And there have been a number of academic papers that have been written about social accounting. And there's also blogs being written, and that's available. And then finally, there's the story of social accounting and audit, where it's come from, and where it's reached to the present day. And so there's a history of it, and there is a special page for John Pearce, who was one of our founders, and some of his writings about not only social accounting, but social enterprise and community enterprise. Now, it's got a bit of potential, the learning platform, but we haven't reached that potential at the moment. But if a Praxis facilitator, they could design a learning program around what information is on the learning platform. The Canvas has the facility where you can film meetings, where there's a bulletin exchange between people. There's, again, a Praxis facilitator can set assignments saying, and guide people through, saying you could perhaps do this next, or you can go and do that. So if you weren't in self-learning and you were looking for sort of mentoring, it's possible for a mentor to guide you through some of the information that's on the learning platform. And it also allows communication between learners and possibility of peer reviews and so on. So it's got a lot of potential, and it can be developed in a number of different ways. And over the next sort of year or 2 years is that we'll try and add to it and develop it further. To become, or to have access to the learning platform is it's open to members of the Social Audit Network. And once you become a member, you would automatically get an invitation to join the learning platform. You actively register, and then you can use it and have access to the information. And there's an information sheet in your clipboard pack. it's one of the many pages in there where you can see how you become a member and also have access to this information. This is a kind of screenshot of what Canvas looks like. And there are 3 parts to this. And I've only really talked about one, which is for SAN members. But there also is a different section for qualified SAN social auditors. And there's been a handbook written specially for auditors to have access to with supplementary files and so on. And if you're a SAN social auditor, then you can have access to that section of it. And then SAN approved, so learning facilitators, they have another section. And over the years, we've developed programs that are 2 hours long, half a day long, 1 day long, 2 days long, and there are lesson plans, handouts, worksheets and supplementary information, and SAN facilitators can have access to that. So in these 3 things is that we're trying to put down in an interactive way a lot of the information that's available over the years and learning that has happened over the years. So plans for the future is really, what I've described this morning is really phase 1, is where we've got to at the moment, but it's work in progress. And we want to try and learn from people that are actively using it, what works and what doesn't work. But we're trying to launch that part today. Phase 2 is we want to update the information as much as possible and add to it. And also I should mention part of phase 2 are 2 possible projects. One is SAN in Australia, one of our sister organisations, are currently working in conjunction with the University of Swinburne in Melbourne to develop an interactive app on social accounting. What it will look like, I'm not very sure at the moment, but that will come out in sometime in 2018. There also is a possibility of a project between SAN India, who are represented here today, and SAN Australia to try and either develop the platform as we've got it at the moment into a more interactive functioning thing, or create something that's very similar to it, but perhaps might be more flexible. So these are the 2 projects that will happen on sort of phase 2. And lastly, I'd just like to say heartfelt thanks to all those that have contributed to all the information that SAN has amassed over the years. The work has not been done by myself and Lisa and the current SAN board, but it's been the accumulation of a lot of work that's been done by many people in the past. John Pierce is one, but there's been Mike Swain, for example, Keith Stamp over the years, and many other different people. So we've really developed this standing on the shoulders of giants. So these previous giants have all contributed to this development in the form of the learning platform. So lastly, I'd just like to announce the launch of the learning platform and look forward to as many people of you using it as possible. So thank you very much.
Almost, we've got that in this country, but not with language, but with the language of organisations. Organisations, depending on which sector they're in, have different languages, and so sometimes the same message doesn't translate to all of those languages. Yeah.
So that's another challenge which we face, especially while stakeholder consultation. Now, if this becomes mandatory, they won't know what to report because everything has to be translated in the local language.
And adds layers of expense and complication as well.
And NGOs in India are far more smaller, so we would really like to take these standards to the NGOs because they are the ones who are driving change there, more than the larger organizations who can understand these standards. And probably if these standards and all come, it will be more for the impact investor per se. It will not really help the NGO to evolve or bring about better methods of delivery. Which if these standards come, which can cater to smaller NGOs, it would be good. The way it's been talked about, it looks as though it will only help CSRs to get more, they might get into the rating, they might get the best CSR awards and things like that, but that's not what should be done. It should be in ways how you create these small indicators for each vertical and try to make them understand that by doing this, this is the impact created and how they can change the world. So that should be the message that should be taken. And we should work on standards meant for smaller NGOs rather than the larger NGOs, because the smaller NGOs need to evolve. They are the ones who are doing great work with great passion, not knowing what they are doing and what impact they are creating. So we'll have to be an eye-opener to them and tell them, yes, please do it in a more methodical and systematic way. You would be able to do wonders. And we have to appreciate them. There are more than 3 million NGOs in India. The ratio is 1 for every 1 NGO, 400 people, 1 NGO is there. So imagine the number of NGOs working. And if all the NGOs really become systematic, then we don't have to depend on the government at all for much of the development to happen. So we have to work on those lines in India, because that would, what's seen is there in the UK is totally different from there.
You need a lot
And
of
also,
auditors there.
yes, and the for-profit social enterprises are also evolving. It's just last 3-4 years, a lot of social enterprises have started to evolve. We tell people, not necessarily you should start an NGO, please start a for-profit social enterprise. They are also working on social change. So we should help these small-timers more than creating systems which will be daunting for them when they are launching the organization. So we'll have to work out on a mechanism where the small people will also be benefited.
Right, thank you. Okay.
In India, the word audit is the most daunting word. And when we say social audit, it becomes double daunting for them, because they think that we are also going to do a financial audit and a social audit. And because all NGOs are small, they also think that we are going to find out who their donors are and try to pass on the information to the other NGO. So when we talk about social accounting and audit, it's a real great challenge. So probably, Alan, we should change the word audit to something else.
I'm not sure that's a battle you're going to win.
Cuddling.
Yes,
Social cuddling.
Yes.
I think that Matthew started the day really, setting the scene, I think. Not only did he introduce us to the sunshine, and actually it's going to be really windy later apparently, but actually he really made sure that we set the scene about who we're for here, that we're actually for everybody who's an interest. And whenever I've been to these, and I've been to quite a few over the years, it's that conversation from people who have completely different interests, completely different levels, very different knowledge, and I'm really thank you, Mike and Jeremy and all our experts for coming and talking about your area and your interests. Not necessarily agreeing, I think, but actually really raising the game about how we should do this effectively. I've got a view actually, but I didn't manage to express it on the experts panel. So that was really important, because it sets the scene of who we are at SAN. We're here, and we're here to learn, and we're here to share. Banju, he managed to present us with a challenge. He said, we need to build bigger influence in the current debate. We all need to do that. It's not just one person, it's just not one organisation, and it's certainly not just one view. It's actually about bringing that conversation into the mainstream.
Remember, the truth around us has been twisted to fit an agenda, not necessarily in the name of peace or safety, but in the name of fulfilling somebody else's unbalanced needs. These days, news stories are resembling whispers on the playground, because truth is a word full of puncture wounds and is rapidly deflating. Truth has led us down a path with little more than breadcrumbs in our pockets, that even white lies can contribute to the problem we are having. You are instrumental in the fight for truth. But first, look in the mirror and be honest, because fake news starts with you.
I add thanks to our panel of experts. Thank you so much, all of you, for coming along and spending time. Thank you for the people. Thank you so much. Thank you to everybody who came this morning and delivered their case studies. That was absolutely fantastic session too. Thank you to all my fellow SAN directors who've pulled together to introduce sessions, help organise the day, and to Anne Lithgow in particular, who's been absolutely
I'm just saying on Laffer's behalf that this newspaper's been brought all the way from India for you. Please do take one. Please do learn a bit more about what's happening there. Some really, really interesting stuff in this. And there's a picture of Alan Kay there.